The chair recognizes the honourable member for Centreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A person is a person, no matter how small. And I attribute the opening of my presentation to my good family, Dr. April Finlayson. Congratulations to her, and we are very proud of you. People are people, no matter how small. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. Today, I would like to begin my presentation with somewhat of an unusual request. I would like to ask every Bahamian under the sound of my voice to recommit themselves, to recommit ourselves to this great Bahama land, pledging our allegiance. If you are bedridden in the Princess Margaret Hospital, or even disabled, let's recommit ourselves. If you are behind our prison walls, let's recommit ourselves. If you are at work and listening or watching via television or listening by radio, let's recommit ourselves. College students abroad and Bahamians worldwide listening via the internet, continue to pray and pledge. If you are a PLP, an FNM, DNA, if you are Bahamian, let's recommit ourselves. This is something we all should have learned from kindergarten and has nothing to do with partisan politics. So let's pledge, let's continue to pledge our allegiance to the flag and to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for which it stands, one people united in love and service. That pledge, Mr. Speaker, was very important and one of the most important things we can do today. Too much is at stake, too much to lose, as we look forward to celebrating our 46th birthday next month. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all the members of Parliament for their commitment to this nation, for their love of country, and for their service to our people. I want to thank honorable senators for the role that they play in passing legislation to govern our country and for their commitment as well. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, Chair of the Legislature in the Bahamas, and Mr. Deputy, Tall Pines. With your own words and actions, you give me hope for a better future. You continue to understand and educate, and God's love of this country continues to manifest itself through your admonitions. The opposition, you have been and continue to be a wealth of knowledge for me and our country. And to this sitting administration, my administration, many of you, I hasten to say, are very good people, and I am sure you are doing the best you can with what you have and with what you know. While I am on that thank you list and my thank you feet, Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank the Free National Movement. A special thank you to the council members and the meritorious council members who believed in the party even when they disagreed, who believed in me even when I disagreed, who stood with me in 1987 as I accompanied Dame Janet Bostwick, in 1992 with the Honorable Calvin Johnson, in 1997 when I assisted with the Honorable Mr. Michael Pintard, in 2002 with Mrs. Pauline Nairn in St. Thomas More, in 2007 with myself in St. Thomas More, in 2012 St. Anne's with the Honorable Mr. Hubert Chipman, and in 2017 with myself once again in Centreville. Thank you, thank you, and thank you again. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, we are in fact running a country, not a company. We are dealing with people, not things. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but to lose his only soul? What does it profit a country to use austere models, methodologies, and policies, but to lose the soul of the Bahamian people, the heart and the soul of the Bahamian family, the value and the soul, Mr. Speaker, of the Bahamas? The center of the body, Mr. Speaker, is where you would find your heart. It is where I would find my heart. The center of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, is Nassau, and the center of Nassau is Centreville. So it is true to say that the heartbeat of our country is in Centreville. This is where you would find the people of the 50s that shaped our present, and the people of the 60s and 70s that took care of us, struggling to build a nation of ownership. Someone, Mr. Speaker, even stopped telling them about who they were and what they owned, thus eliminating the power of wealth, dignity, and success of generations of Bahamians. It was Mason's edition that produced Sir Olaf Francis and the Lockharts. It was the Valley, Mr. Speaker, that produced our third Prime Minister. And it was East Street, Mr. Speaker, that produced the late Bernard Nottage and our very own, my very own, Miss Bahamas, Fontella, Chipman, Roll, and the list goes on and on and on. That's Centreville, Mr. Speaker, the heartbeat of our country of 700 islands and keys. If you take account of Bahamians coming from our family islands to visit, friends and family in Nassau, I would guess that 8 out of 10 of them end up in Centreville somewhere. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is the heartbeat of the Bahamas, and home is where the heart is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for an opportunity to present in the 2019-2020 budget debate. As always, I thank God and the wonderful people of Centreville, because without them, I would not be here today, not only representing them, but a way of being a national voice for our people, the Bahamian people. Today is a very special day for me, Mr. Speaker, as I would like to wish my lovely sister, Fontella Chipman Roll, a happy birthday. As Centreville continues to recognize women who dare to stand for fairness and justice for our people, she will undoubtedly be the recipient of the Centreville prestigious Thumbs Up Award this month. I am so glad I came to know an amazing God. And that is not to say I am not a sinner. It is simply to say I know him. And I am encouraged by him. And I encourage anyone who doesn't know him to get to know him. That is where faith, hope, and love abides, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, fortunately for the Bahamas and our nation and our people, God is our Alpha and the Omega, and therefore the only ruler of time, and everything in its time. We may want things to remain the same, Mr. Speaker, same old, same old. But if same old is not good and not just, he sends his champions along to ensure that his work gets done. For only what is done for good and in God will last. I was thinking today, Mr. Speaker, as I took my seat, that to my right would be Kalani and to my left, to my right would be Freetown and to my left would be Kalani to show their support for me. However, that didn't happen, so I will move forward. But thank you very much, you know. Thank you very much, you know. We will move the country and we will move forward, Mr. Speaker. Our nation, Mr. Speaker, is frustrated. For more than 20 years, only receiving minimum. Look at this, lad. Look at this. That's what I'm talking about. So to my right is Pinewood, and to my left is Mount Moriah. And you too will undoubtedly make history. Our nation, Mr. Speaker, is frustrated. When you have worked for the government for more than 20 years, only receiving minimum wage and not P&P, you become frustrated. When your leaders cannot be trusted, not even with the words that come out of their mouths, you become frustrated. When the tourism and fishing industry are not your own, you become frustrated. When the cost of living continues to increase, unemployment rises, and crime become unpredictable, you get frustrated. Mr. Speaker, our nation is becoming and is frustrated. When churches need politicians to get a piece of land, and when your promotion or salary increase depends on your politics, you become frustrated. The frustration impacts your home life because you need to find another job to help make ends meet. Public servants, Mr. Speaker, are having to become security guards and housekeepers on the side to make up their salaries, and therefore not enough time to bring up or care for our children. Mr. Speaker, when the waiters and bartenders tips, paid school fees, and bought Sunday dinner, and that is no longer discretionary, a country becomes frustrated. The frustration of our nation, Mr. Speaker, is taking a toll, and I predict we will become even more frustrated as the reality of how we got here sinks in. Mr. Speaker and honorable colleagues, with all due respect, we are running a country, not a company. Our nation is frustrated. When your application for a stall in the straw market or your business plan sits on someone's desk for years without an answer, that's frustration, Mr. Speaker. When your child is gunned down and are lost in a plane incident and there's no recourse or even no response, that is frustration. When the government owes you money and it's been a while and turnaround continues, you get frustrated as your child sits in a college dorm or an apartment without food and about to be evicted. When your loved ones, Mr. Speaker, are dying because of inadequate health care and or resources, this is frustration. One may say, or what you may say, what does that have to do with this budget? It has everything to do with this budget, because this is the people's budget. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, we are running a country, not a company. A country has people, Mr. Speaker, and not all of them are employees. Not all of them are employed or even employable. A country believes in its people. A company believes in profits and the bottom line. A country has natural resources. A company has products or services. A country, Mr. Speaker, feels. A company has no feelings. And in most cases, it can care less about its people or its citizenry. One of the hardest questions, Mr. Speaker, in the world to answer is, how do you support someone who does not support you? How do you support an organization that does not support you? How does a Bahamian, how does the Bahamas support people who do not support them? Very interesting, but an ironic concept that holds its roots in the disturbances of the politics of the people. How, Mr. Speaker, does one support a budget that does not support them, but we do? And we accept, and we groan, and we accept, and we cry, and we accept, and we are sickened, and we accept. In politics, Mr. Speaker, like in life, there's so many sides to so many different stories. There's one that makes you feel like something is happening, and then there may be a more real one or less real one that lets you know that nothing is happening at all. The good thing about life and books, we can all have our own interpretations, and they all ought to be respected. My analysis, Mr. Speaker, of this budget went a little deeper than before. This is the third budget presentation that I'm a part of. And as in any forecast, you look for the vision, the systemic and the systematic change for a nation that cried for change 2 short years ago. The tourism numbers look great, but yet we are unemployed, and the tourism product remain unmonetized. Government must direct a path to ownership. Don't just talk about it. We cannot have a tourism industry we do not own. Government must have a strategic plan to embrace economic equality. It was our people, Mr. Speaker, that brought our stopover visitors back, not things, and not images, and not even advertisements. The fiscal strategy is responsible, East End, and one I can appreciate. But the gap between the haves and the have-nots continue to widen. The gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. Government, once again, must have a strategic plan to embrace a socio-economy. Career paths are being destroyed due to lack of planning and socio-economic integration. Efficient governance is fine, but Bahamian ownership in its natural resources and the stability, our mental and physical stability of the Bahamian mind, Mr. Speaker, is at an all-time low. Education at the tertiary level, a thumbs up, Mr. Speaker, but our children are not qualifying. We are not getting them to finish school, and in some cases, we aren't even getting them to go to school. Fairness, justice, and righteousness must be the order of the day, Mr. Speaker. I attended a forum at the University of the Bahamas because after the talk of the Westminster system, I wanted to get a better understanding. The Westminster system, as I interpret it, was actually born out of democracy when used as intended. In my opinion, and it may just simply be the art of politics. What politicians here in the Bahamas have craftily done over the years was avoid the part of the Westminster system that actually educates us, that educates people. For example, avoiding questions and answer days, suspending the House as to avoid member statements at certain times, or even crafting the rule book to avoid answering petitions. Not having an independent parliament, which in itself stagnates growth and development. What a sad state of affairs, Mr. Speaker. If we are truly interested in educating our people, let's educate them. Politics does not like education. Our history has shown that to us. Look at our schools in Centreville. Look at our school board budgets. Look at how much we really know about what's going on in our country. Mr. Speaker, you would know. I would have given notice of 5 select committees. A select committee and for the investigation of fake news, which has now moved into a more dramatic direction, referred to as deep fakes. The Select Committee on Natural Resources and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Select Committee on Public-Private Partnerships, a Select Committee on the Quieting Titles Act, and the Select Committee to deal with the rampage and social media with regards to late Mr. Derek Roll Kelly. What if Derek Roll Kelly was your loved one and wanted to live because of whatever he believed? Should we throw Mr. Derek Roll Kelly and his family out to the wolves just because? He is a Bahamian, and he needed to be heard. We must remember that we are all God's people, and none of us is any better or worse than the late Derek Roll Kelly, delusional or not. So his family and those Bahamians referenced in that ordeal will continue to be in my prayers. Politics, Mr. Speaker, divides us. It divides families. Don't be used. And at the end of the day, you have nothing. And you have lost the goodwill of what it means to be human, and what it means to be family, what it means to be Bahamian. These small contracts and jobs that the system gives out is a joke to what you deserve. Talk show hosts, mainstream and streamers, the media, mainstream, and bloggers. And let's not forget our Bahamian WhatsApp personalities. You all deserve a lot of credit. You've been doing a good job at educating the Bahamian people. Don't stop, even if it is only your opinion. Don't sell us out. Don't sell our children out. Stay focused. This is about the next generation, not about us. Mr. Speaker, it is a sad state of affairs. Mr. Speaker, I hosted an exhibition on slavery at the Pompey Museum during my tenure at AMMC. And all parliamentarians were invited, and I think one person from the governing side showed up, and 3 from the side opposite, and one apology from the member of Cat Island, which I can appreciate. They were all invited again to the 100-year church service. Only Mangrove Key showed up again. Thank you, sir. And there were maybe 3 or 4 regards. You see, Mr. Speaker, respect, principle, and dignity cannot be bought. They are ingrained. Train up a child in the way they should grow, and they will not depart. So selling out for me is not an option. No. Just simply wasn't brought up that way. All of that, Mr. Speaker, was in an attempt to exercise political maturity and parliamentary education in a town that desperately needs it. Political maturity, I guess, our politics is not ready for that. Mr. Speaker, I resigned in protest against the stagnation of a Public Accounts Committee, a most important committee of this House, and to our people, because of a ruling, in my opinion, that was being used by both sides and in fact abused and eroded public trust and hindered progress. It definitely diminished my trust. Mr. Speaker, we were unable to get the House to respond to a petition by the people for a Ministry of Natural Resources and/or the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Centreville asked for the tabling of some announced PPPs, namely the landfill, the port, and AMMC. Nothing. Not even a note of respect for the people of Centreville. Once again, Mr. Speaker, how do you support people who do not support you? How do we support people who do not support us? Tough question, and it's for each and every one of us to answer. Mr. Speaker, we are rearing a frustrated nation because of our work environments, whether it's in the public service and or not, or the private sector. Our environment is not conducive to the respect of the Bahamian citizen, respect for our workers, and respect for each other. When you use politics not to respond to the people, you do not respect them. You do not respect what they voted for. When you say one thing to the people today and something else tomorrow without apology, you do not respect the people, and you do not respect their vote. When people are used for the sake of power, you do not respect them, and you do not respect their vote. When the people voted no, clearly no, in the referendum, and we turn around and do what they say not to do, you don't respect them, and you don't respect their vote. So where is the representation for the people in our parliament? Where is it, Mr. Speaker? So can you imagine what we are taking home to our children? A mind of degradation, disrespect, and discrimination? What we are passing on to the next generation of Bahamians? Bahamas, we have politics that believe you don't deserve to have anything. We have politics that believe they don't need to listen to you. We have politics that know the law, the land, and the value. So as they give over the hill a piece of bone, they run away with the chicken, the whole meat.
Oh my Lord.
As they sell us service lots, watch who's running away with the acres of land. As they give us seed money, watch who's running away with the fruit basket. As they give, Mr. Speaker, us a loan we cannot afford, repossess our cars and homes, watch who is running away with the bank. As we tout Bahamian ownership, calling it shares, I'm saying that a lot, simply Bahamas, follow who is getting what and vote accordingly. That's political maturity. We must think deeper, Bahamians. Too much is at stake. Vote for people who got you. Then we are expected, Mr. Speaker, to be on the job smiling and excited as we take home $210 per week after an already 12% back tax. Really? As the country screams no to WTO, the question becomes, what will we do? Not everyone will understand the fight, but farther along they will be able to appreciate it.
Understand why?
Father Bain at Christ Church Cathedral gave a riveting sermon at the church service in honor of the Chipman Centennial celebration.
I was there.
And he said how they called Jesus a disturber of the peace.
Yes.
He went on to explain that there is no peace where there is injustice and unrighteousness.
He said that.
He said we cannot pretend to have peace because peace is from within. So we may look for peace in here, but it doesn't mean all is well. So if Mandela could have done 27 years for his people, we should be prepared to do just as much for us. The people of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, deserve this. They are depending on us. Accountability and transparency. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the budget, I want to first address the issue of transparency and accountability. The government would have produced quarterly reports and dubbed them accountable and transparent. Transparency and accountability is a culture, Mr. Speaker, not just an event. Financial responsibility is a process, not just a moment in time. Only through transparency and accountability will you get enforcement, which I believe the Revenue Enhancement Unit priority is, hence proper revenue collection. Transparency plus accountability equals enforcement. The government is forecasting increased revenue through enforcement and its collection processes, albeit starting 2021, 21, 22. You cannot enforce, Mr. Speaker, what one doesn't know to be accounted for. And you cannot account for that which is not or what is not transparent. International Public Sector Accounting Standards, IPSAS 24, which the government has indicated they intend to go to from cash basis to modified and then to IPSAS. It speaks to the level of aggregation when presenting budget reports publicly. Aggregation is when numbers are lumped together under a particular heading. Readers are unable at some times to determine, like you would have seen today, what the numbers are, having not been itemized. A certain level of lumping or aggregation, Mr. Speaker, can lead to a lack of transparency and hence a disturbance in an anti-corruption model. I believe that East End had indicated that there was a certain level of consolidation in terms of the numbers and the headings and the lumping together of the numbers. In our numbers, Mr. Speaker, we call this aggregation. However, we are cautious with our judgment as it can impact the level of transparency.
Yes, that's it.
I would like the government to reconsider the lumping of numbers in budget presentation.
Yes.
One in particular, general administration, so as to allow us to see where the revenue is coming from and what the money is being spent on in an itemized way, and hence making direct comparisons and better decisions. Last week, Exuma would have thanked my good cousin-in-law, Mr. Michael Alcides, for initiating the Chart of Accounts project while at the Ministry of Finance, which I believe to be absolutely necessary.
Yes.
And I thank him as well.
Yes.
But I must thank East End, my good colleague and friend, for forging ahead, as it gives our country an opportunity to regroup and remodel our position. The Chart of Accounts exercise is, and was important too, transparency. This process should have included a review with all parliamentarians, as categories and comparisons would have changed. Transparency can help us to see your vision, East End, more clearly. And on the flip side, help us to hold you accountable, which in turn will lead to revenue enforcement and government meeting its revenue target. I will opine that the more transparent you are, the more accountable you will be, and the more revenue you will collect. I am also of the opinion, Mr. Speaker, that there is a direct correlation between transparency, accountability, and revenue collection. So don't look to meet those revenue targets if you are not going to be transparent and accountable. And at the very least, with transparency and accountability, the people will understand your revenue position, whether you met the target or not. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, Mr. IMF and Mr. OECD, we are running a country, not a company. We must strike the right balance to make it work for our people, the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, even in Hong Kong and Singapore, the two more recognized and positive models of trying to run a country this way as a company, they are challenged with the impact of social development and humanity. More protest and unrest even as I speak. It is challenging when trying to balance business interest, country interest, and the public good. But I hasten to say that it can be done. A key component of making it work, Mr. Speaker, is simple. It's ownership. Ownership with the people. Ownership by the people. Ownership for the people. But most importantly, majority ownership. Your growth rate is up, but your frustration index is up as well. People or politics. Your forecasted revenue is trending up, but your corruption index is up. Transparency International. People versus politics. A lot of tourists, but your unemployment numbers are up. People versus politics. Mr. Speaker, the number of businesses started are up, but your cost of living is up as well. People or politics. All while minimum wage and minimum or no pension to our people are contributing to even your depression index. People or politics. My position remains the same, and it has been that since my campaign. This should be about people, not about politics. I note, Mr. Speaker, that the revenue projections are even lower than that which was projected in 2018-2019. I believe we can beat this target with adequate accountability and transparency, which will lead to adequate enforcement, not only from the public resources, but also from our state-owned enterprises. They collect funds as well. Public-private partnerships, Mr. Speaker. The government has touted numerous public-private partnerships, including that of the Port or Downtown Port, Antiques, Monuments and Museum Corporation, and the landfill. I stand to be corrected, but I see no contribution to the revenue lines from these projects, which were touted as $250 million, $30 million, and $130 million respectively. At some point, Mr. Speaker, a PPP policy was tabled in the House with no indication of monetization. The model has to change to allow for some reasonable deposit or monetary contribution, even if it's refundable. Once again, these PPP arrangements, in my opinion, lack transparency and adequate disclosure for our country. I would hate to think, Mr. Speaker, that none of these arrangements are bringing any money to the table. Is the model still get approvals and concessions before they show us the money, even before adequate due diligence is done? Some things, Mr. Speaker, must change. The PPP policy tabled should have included features of monetization, a people's corporate governance model, accompanied by a monitoring program as it relates to transparency and accountability. The due diligence and compliance programs for accepting them should be made public and tabled, and in some cases even debated, depending on the value of the project and its cultural and heritage and environmental implications. Nothing more than what we have seen before. And the underlying impact of those are frightening, as the cost of concessions usually outweigh what we get. What is the impact on our revenue based on the cost of concessions and exemptions given? That is a key aspect we seem not to mention even in our fiscal responsibility strategy. Management of the cost of concessions and exemptions given. Hopefully, we will see some revenue from these PPPs soon, and not land and country giveaways to political cronies and special interest groups. Centreville will continue to watch the evolution of these PPPs. The dormant account. We would have passed a dormant account legislation which was anticipated to bring in $40 million to the Treasury, and I did not see that in the forecasted revenue section. As this piece of legislation was touted as being forward-thinking and progressive, and I voted for it because of such. So I would like to have seen, at the very least, estimates of receipts as projected from the dormant account regime. Royalties from natural resources. Mr. Speaker, last year and the year before, I was concerned about the amount of royalties received from aragonite mining. For many years, this amount was shown to be $40,000. However, approved forecast revenue now shows zero, and the forecasted revenue for royalty from aragonite for the 2019-2020 year shows 22. Maybe this category is now aggregated into another heading or number. As our natural resources and the Sovereign Wealth Fund are important to this country, so important that a petition was presented to the House by the people. I believe it is important for us to understand the accounting methodology, account charting that comes with the aragonite, the minerals, other natural resources, inclusive of the sale of our Bahama land. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, all contracts as it relates to our natural resources, including mineral, sand, aragonite, land, should be made public knowledge and up for debate, if only for the establishment of the Select Committee and its environmental concerns. Immigration, Mr. Speaker. I could not help but notice the revenue section, a whopping $20 million increase for immigration. Does this mean we anticipate more foreign workers coming due to the change in laws? In the expected revenue by the Department of Immigration, more than 75% of this increase will come from work and resident permit fees. Nearly $12 million increase. Mr. Speaker, expected increases in these revenues over the next 3 years, to me, simply means that the government expects more foreign workers, and at all levels, not just laborers, but professionals as well. This will no doubt increase our unemployment rate. This will no doubt increase our unemployment rate and reduce the value of the average Bahamian in the workplace. We will see. This increase, Mr. Speaker, is signaling a rise in unemployment and discouraged Bahamian workers, a rise in the Bahamian Frustration Index and the Bahamian Depression Index, and a decrease in the opportunities for Bahamians, and a decrease in the Bahamian and national enterprise. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to expenditure. School board stipend decrease. I would...
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member
Finish.
Bernards.
I would just like to remind the honourable member there was an increase in the fees last year, and the increase in the fee collection this year based on work permits, etc., is based on that increase and based on 10 months of historical evidence of the fees collected.
Like I had indicated, Mr. Speaker, we will see. I now move to the expenditure section of the debate. School board stipend decrease. I would have asked on many occasions to increase the school board stipends for the schools in Centreville. The heartbeat of our nation, Mr. Speaker, all of the school board stipends were decreased. As these school boards continue to struggle to make ends meet, they also required in some cases to hire security and janitress. This continues to place an extra burden on our parents who are already disadvantaged. I have noticed an increase in the lunch program, and I applaud that. However, we must consider the work and function of the school board in accordance with the Act and its related regulations, and the introduction of new guidelines to ensure households are being impacted. Therefore, preparing our schools, our school boards, our parents, and our children for fiscal responsibility and their future. University of the Bahamas stipend and grants. Once again, the tuition-free indications and/or implications in the budget is significant. Based on the budget information, it appears as if UB will get 50 million and BTVI 10 million. I am not sure of the justification of the numbers based on whether it was based on expected enrollment, on qualifications, books, or other affordability. But it is important, Mr. Speaker, for the tabling of current financial information of all organizations receiving government grants, no matter the intention of the government. Social services. Once again, it was good to see the social assistance budgets return as they were reduced the year before, the impact of which was felt in Centreville. It is important to consider our socio-economy as part of an effort to enrich the lives of those less fortunate. It is not as simple as saying, give them a donation. It is so much more to the development of minds and lives that have been downtrodden for generations. Education, training, and quality assurance. We need...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Southern Shores on a point of order.
Yeah, I went to Donald Davis and Aaron Bailey, but they suggest more than one. One category of social assistance, uniform allowance, one category was decreased.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Centreville.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the clarification. It is important to consider our socio-economy as part of an effort to enrich the lives of those less fortunate. It is not as simple as saying, give a donation. It is much more to the development of minds and lives that have been downtrodden for generations. Education and training. The Bahamas has not been good with quality assurance due to lack of regulations accompanying acts, policies and procedures, and guidelines that should be subject to quality assurance programs. I believe a lack of quality assurance when it comes to our laws and regulation have led to previous downgrades and blacklistings, lack of knowledge, and lack of opportunities for Bahamians. There are some good things that I would like to note. The exemption on musical instruments. Mr. Speaker, no doubt there are some good things here. I love the exemption on musical instruments as this is an important aspect of our culture and our heritage. However, the creativity and the ingenuity of our people need to be protected, and we must look at strengthening our copyright laws and creating and addressing our competition laws. Also our intellectual property to protect our music and entertainment industry. It is not just okay to say you got exemptions. We must show them a career path to ownership and success. Exemptions, better musicians, scholarships for our children, career in music. Underlying a career path is always an avenue to financial stability. Pay less for your instruments. Study the art of music. Paid to play music. But the government will make the laws to protect and preserve your talent. Lenny Kravitz, a Bahamian American, a millionaire for music. He would not be a millionaire if him and his music was not protected by the laws of the United States. Those are strictly enforced. So government must do their part to protect the talent of our people. Economic equality is important in the entertainment industry. Our musicians, but
reduced after 2017.
Economic equality is important in the entertainment industry. Our musicians, entertainers, comedians, dancers, artists, junkaneurs ought to receive equal pay for equal work, whilst their talents are legally protected. The Fiscal Responsibility Act. This was a very good piece of legislation to have passed, and it's no doubt a legacy piece of legislation. I would have liked to have seen regulations, policies and procedures, and guidelines, so that the impact can be felt at all levels. And then we can hold our governments accountable, even at the voters' booth. Guidelines would have helped the average Bahamian household to understand the how and the why of fiscal responsibility and the need to be encouraged in times of fiscal management. The increase in social services is to be commended. We would have suffered a decrease, but as the minister grows with his portfolio of social management and social enterprise, I'm sure the adjustments are being made, and I can appreciate that. The over-the-hill initiative. Whether some may like it or not, feel it or not, just the fact that the attention is being given to this initiative is a big deal for me and the over-the-hill community. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that we ought to be accountable to our people. So being honest and fair to them, not because they live over the hill, we leave them unpaid, unmonitored, or unresourced. Some not so good things. I would have liked to have seen more money for our school boards. I would have liked to see our teachers paid more, and each class, especially in the inner city, with a teacher assistant to help to curb unnoticed behavior. Our classes, Mr. Speaker, in Centreville are still overcrowded and therefore inadequate teaching resources. I would have liked to have seen more contract workers made permanent. I would have liked to have seen an increase in the minimum wage. I would have liked to have seen a total breakdown and rebuilding of the schools in Centreville to include swimming pools and gymnasiums. This to build our athletic brand that our children work so hard on. I would have liked to have seen more money and resources allocated to at-risk youths. Some creative things, Mr. Speaker, that may be able to assist. It's the building of our athletic brand. I remember, Mr. Speaker, some years ago when we got the box of cornflakes, it always used to have on the front of it some athlete. It used to be an American athlete or something like that. Wheaties, those boxes, cereal. And I think I remember writing Kellogg's because at that time, I wanted them to, if they were going to put any photos of all the cereals that were coming to the Bahamas, I wanted them to put Bahamian athletes on it because by then we were already hitting a brand in the international arena. And, I got no response except that, I was told about exclusivity and that sort of stuff. But I would like to see us negotiate on that level in terms of ensuring that our Bahamian people remain, find ownership in the things they love to do, and to give our future a chance. Competition law and antitrust laws. Ensuring that no one, Mr. Speaker, has an exclusivity agreement or to a monopoly or control of any business or industry. We could talk empowerment and new business all we want. If somebody has a monopoly on a particular business or an exclusivity agreement from the states, then where's the end game in this empowerment or production model? So we need to look at our competition laws, creating competition laws, and the antitrust laws. I think we did some work with the IRCA Act and the Communication Act, but I think that deals specifically that industry. We need to take that to the tourism industry. We need to take it to the fishing industry. We need to take it to all of our industry to make sure that the Bahamian people are protected and that their business can survive and strive. And at the same time, protect our country and our birthright. We must strengthen our copyright laws, because what's good for the foreigner should be good for us. Ensuring comparative pay for our musicians and entertainers is only one example. Better schools, Mr. Speaker, and more teacher assistants and higher paid teachers. I mean, the budget is big. It looks like 1.6% growth. Let's get to the heart of the matter, right? It's the people. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we ought to discourage land grabbing and land giveaways at the disenfranchisement of our people. Let's watch this one carefully over the next years. In summary, let's fix our laws, empower our nation. But it's only going to happen if we fix our laws. The business plan may look great, but if those laws aren't protecting the Bahamian people and our industries, nothing's happening. That's in my opinion. So it's not what you should be doing as a government. I mean, I appreciate the roads. I appreciate the intention of capital infrastructure. That's what we should be doing as a government. It's about what you have the will to do. The Centreville Capital Fund has been used to deal with cleaning and contractual improvements in the area. We had an influx of social and educational assistance, housing and environmental repair assistance as well. And so maybe I understand on one end, you may want to cut, which I can understand on financial responsibility. But on the other hand, it's going to have to come from somewhere. So I found myself being more, really inundated in my office in Centreville with persons needing really social services assistance. The Centreville projects. Mr. Speaker, we have quite a number of projects going on in Centreville, and I'm just going to touch on them. In particular, the Lunch and Learn program and the College Bound, where we would have gone into the schools, had lunch, and really discussed with the children Parliament, its procedures, their voting rights, etc. Most importantly, what we wanted to do was encourage them in terms of the conversation of college. Many of the people in the Centreville constituency believe they finished school at grade, I guess when you go to D.W. Davis, some of them think they finish at 9th grade. And that's a mindset. And so we wanted to get in to start talking about college and what it means to want to continue your education and what it means when college doesn't end until you're around 20-something. It doesn't end at 12 or 14 or 16, because once they have that in their head, that it ends then, they then think that they are either man or woman, and of course, may or may not do man or woman things. Then we have the manufacturing and the technology projects. And this is where we bring people together who are doing manufacturing. But what's most important to me, Mr. Speaker, is that these persons are aware of the concessions. What you find in our country is there's a certain group of people that they know these concessions. They know them so good, because only them is get it. But we want our people to know where these concessions are. And so we would have done, make copies, and we have training sessions. Go get your concession. You have a right to get it. Stop feeling like because your business is over the hill, but some of Centreville is not an over the hill area. But I don't want them to feel as if they don't have a right to concession, and that is a mindset. So we have some work to do when we talk about, making over the hill better and what we're going to do to make sure our people close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And then, of course, our technology project, and we have about 3 more projects, but I just want to touch on the technology project. Mr. Speaker, what we would have done, and a lot of businesses would have made contribution to the technology project, where they would have bought in old computers, keyboards, adapters, whatever it is. But once you get children in a room looking at those items, they start to be able to fix them and put them together. And so when you see a child can create a keyboard just after 2 or 3 short weeks, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about technological development. So to this end, Mr. Speaker, as always, I commend the government on their efforts and rely on their words and their presentations that this budget is in the best interest of our people. I can only wish and hope that the government establishes some form of committee on career paths to focus on how we evolve from education to jobs to careers to ownership. We must continue to build relationships and understand that the value of what it really means, what it really means to be a Bahamian, and what it really means to be what God wants us to be. Hope we can get to a point where we can forecast contingencies and their impact on our numbers, such as hurricanes and unfunded pension liability. I pray, Mr. Speaker, that the Bahamas will be returned to the Bahamian people because we are to whom it was intended for. Every single piece of legislation passed in this House should be Bahamianized, not specialized, but Bahamianized. So, God bless you, Mr. Speaker, and the honorable members. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I want to ask God to lay a special blessing on the people of Centreville. Thank you very much.